Good evening, everyone. My name is Millie Shaw, and I'm an associate professor of mathematics here at the Cooper Union. I want to welcome all of you here to Rose Auditorium. I just wanted to say that this talk is sponsored by a Cooper grant between the engineering school and the art school, where we're trying to explore interdisciplinary experiences through the themes of movement and body tracking. I'm super excited to invite Yeseul Song here to Cooper and for her to talk more about her work creating invisible structures. Yeseul Song is a Korean-born, New York-based artist who examines the fluid nature of human perception and its relationship with society, culture, and its and environment through interactive artworks that combine digital technology and analog materials. Yeseul is currently a resident artist at the Museum of Art and Design, a member of New Ink and Rhizome's Art and Code track, and a fellow at the Engelberg Center. She is the winner of the IF Design Award in Communications Art Interactive Annual. She teaches at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts Interactive Telecommunications program, otherwise known as ITP. I believe that her work is a wonderful example of the potential between tactile and kinetic art, and an example of how beautiful the intersection between engineering and art can be. So with that, I'm super excited to welcome Yeseul.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Millie, for a very nice introduction. And nice to meet you, everyone. And thank you for coming tonight. And I want to thank Millie, Autonomy Lab, and Cooper Union for inviting me to making this happen today, and everyone who helped organizing this today. And it feels really good to talk in an auditorium with people after years of talking on Zoom or in an empty room. So very nice to meet all of you. So my name is Yeseul Song, and I am an artist and an educator, and I use technology and interaction as artistic medium in my practice. And just to introduce where I'm coming from, Millie already introduced, I'm currently doing a residency at the Museum of Arts and Design, and also affiliated with New Ink at the New Museum. And I teach at NYU Tisch School of Arts, ITP. I see some familiar faces from ITP and IMA, which are Interactive Media Arts. And I teach courses like this: physical computing, interaction as art medium, intangible interaction, and project development studios. And this is one of the Zoom classroom taken very physical using a Polaroid camera and with some very precious physical computing components. So today I will talk about my recent project, Invisible Sculptures, from the perspective of creating new sensory experience and language. So let me start with some of my early projects. An illuminated path from 2016 is a couple of light bulbs that follow you and illuminate your way. And we are fascinated by technology, but also we are scared and wary at the same time. And this work explores the complexity of our emotions and perception towards technology. Using these light bulbs, which are regarded as very positive objects that follows you, which can be a little creepy in a way. So most people I think delighted by it because they saw it in an art setting where they are expecting something weird. But there are also some people who are like a little creeped out. Oh, like why is this following me? I don't like this. And the next work is Mirages. It's in collaboration with an artist, Hwan, and it is an illusion of light that respond to you are body movement. It follows you, and you can change the size and the shape of it. And you can play with it just like you do with a ball. And a very interesting thing for me in this project was that even if this is just an illusion, people thought it as a tangible object and play with it and giving different materiality depending on how it is responding to you. And this work actually made me grow my interest and more passion to explore in human perception and senses. And I have a little question here. Do any of you remember how many times did you turn on and off a light today until you come here? Like 5, 10? I guess these days a lot of things are automatic. So turning on and off light is a very simple activity that we do every day, almost unconsciously. And I zoomed into the moment of turning on the light, which is a very simple interaction, and intervene the moment with meditative and cultural experience. So to turn on the light, you have to move a grain of rice one by one to the tray and to slowly turn on the light. It could take like 1 minute to some people, but maybe tens of minutes to some people, depending on your chopstick skills. And this work was shown at a very busy gallery, but I was able to see like people are having their own time and meditative moment just to turn on this light. And the very meditative and slow movement they were having in a very busy gallery. And the interaction also evokes a situation where it would appear that certain cultural background or specialized skills, such as using chopsticks, could privilege some tasks, like very simple tasks, just like turning on a light bulb. Yeah, I guess the rice steamer work shows what sort of directly shows what it means to work with interaction as smart medium. And then, so I was having fun making this project, and then around the time I was exposed to the electromagnetic spectrum theory, and I was fascinated by the idea. Are you all familiar with it? Yeah, so I have a big favor. Can we raise our hands, so raise our arm and shake them slowly in the air? Yay, thank you. It's good stretching also. So you might not feel anything in your hand, but this space is full of signals, radio signals, cell phone signals, and infrared and more. And we are actually grabbing them, like wrapping the signal around our wrist while we are doing this. So thank you for participating. According to this theory, everything in the universe is made of different frequency and energy, and that's why things exist as different forms. And some are visible, some are hearable, some are tangible, but most of the frequency is actually totally intangible. And actually, what we see is just a tiny fraction of the whole spectrum. Knowing this fact made me think that so the color part is only the visible spectrum among the universe. And I'm sure there is like more and more that is not shown in the graph. And knowing these facts made me think that like first, wow, I'm just a small thing in the universe. And my art has been just using, and my medium has been confined to this tiny spectrum, light or something visible. And that's not only me, and the whole art world is visually dominant and confined in this tiny visible spectrum. And I wanted to unlock the potential of invisible spectrum as creative medium, And that's how started the project that I will be talking about now. On another hand, there are boundaries that are invisible, but they definitely exist, and they define and limit our movement in everyday life. So, for example, there are invisible boundaries between high and low income neighborhoods, or between people with disability and those without. Many people say that artists make the invisible visible through their artwork, and it's their mission, but I wanted to create an experiential metaphor rather than something visual that might not be visual, but is something that can be experienced by people with their own body. And that's how I started visual sculptures. You might ask, sculptures are usually something that has a tangible form and is visible. And what do you mean by invisible sculpture? Does that even exist? Oh, you'll see. Are any of you familiar with this beautiful fruit? Can anyone say what this is? Yeah. The first invisible sculpture I created was made of smell of durian, which is known for its strong odor, described as, if you search Google, it will say turpentine and onions garnished with a gym sock. I got this fruit from a grocery store. Actually, that was my first time getting this fruit. And it was like really big and spiky. I didn't know how to hold it, so I was just holding it like really carefully and brought it home. But it was so smelly. It was really well ripe. So I had to just keep it outside my window, and it is sitting on an emergency staircase now. So I cut open the fruit in my apartment. My roommate was not happy. Brought a piece to the Grand Central Station. The smell was so horrible that people really walk away from me. Some people are being polite, but some people are like, why is she like smelling bad? Then I was a little offensive, but well, it's for the art. So so through the process, I was able to create a big smell sculpture around me, which is an empty space, and visualized by the people who were avoiding me, because the other parts of the central station was very crowded. So after the smell experiment, which gave me a horrible headache, I conceptualized this project called Invisible Sculptures as a series of sculptures that are invisible but can be seen by senses other than vision. And this is the very first drawing that I made when I started the project in 2018. And I just imagined a room full of empty podiums. And so on top of these museological objects, which are podiums, empty-looking podiums, they are sculptures made of sound, heat, air, and smell. And they are occupying the space above the podiums and creating a form, although you cannot see it. So since 2018, I have been developing this project through different iterations and different technical research. And compared to technology for visual systems or monitors or displays, projectors, much less research has been done in these fields. And it's like, even though if there are like a lot, there might be a lot, but they're like much less accessible, especially for like creative applications. I'm not coming from engineering background. I'm an artist, like hacking things and learning things to use in my artwork. And for those, it was very hard and very academic information to get to. So it's been a very unique, quite a journey for me. So this year, I had a really great opportunity to do a solo exhibition with 8 invisible sculptures that I have created. It was at the Clay Art Museum in South Korea. It was my first solo exhibition in South Korea. And the museum is specialized, the clay art museum is specialized in architecture and ceramics. So most of their collection is actually very tangible and very material oriented. And when I got the invitation from the museum, I found it really exciting that they are interested in showing something that is like totally different from what they used to show, and that was really exciting to me. And I also really like that they're not approaching my work as like technology-based work. Oh, we want to bring some new media work, and that's why we are inviting you. It was not like that. They were really interested in the idea and concept of the invisible sculpture, like crossing over the mediums. So I decided to work with them, and we did it. It was on for 5 months, from April through last summer at the end of August. And it was not an easy journey because the pandemic, I was here, and then the museum is there, but it worked out, so let me bring you to the exhibition. It is actually an irony that I'm trying to show you the invisible sculpture through the screen here, but I will do my best. So when you enter the space, there is nothing except empty display shelves. The second room is not so different. So what's going on here is installation work in progress. So this Korean kid who visited the show was saying, it's funny that they asked me to see something when there is nothing. However, when I tried to see, there was something. I found this comment to be funny and philosophical at the same time. That's what young people can do, I guess. So I wanted to share it with you. To experience a sculpture, so we are gonna get through each room. You need to unlearn and relearn how to see by synthesizing your senses, such as like olfactory, tactile, and like auditory senses rather than visual senses. And it is a similar process of learning a new language for your senses and perception. And yes, you are invited to learn new sensory languages here. So the show consists of 4 rooms, and the first room has 2 sound sculptures. The sound sculpture sits inside the hole there. And to see the sculpture, you need to integrate what you hear with your hand movement and your location, the location of your hands. So usually when we touch something, I get feedback through my hand, like directly. But in this case, you are actually getting feedback through your ear instead of like tactile senses. So if there is a sculpture, if you start touching the boundary, you'll start hearing the sound through your ear. So you can like figure out where is a boundary by seeing where the sound is. And when you're inside the sculpture, you can like hear different frequencies and different harmony depending on where you're exploring to translate that into different density and texture of the sculpture. And then by taking time this way, you can perceive the form of the invisible sculpture. Yeah, this is very hard to explain through words, so I don't know if that makes sense, but let's see what people do when they see it. So I love watching people interacting with my work or any other interactive artwork. It's always fun and really inspiring. And on this day at the museum, I was just hiding in the corner to observe visitors who are interacting with my work. And I really like this visitor who reacted so sensitively to every sound that she's triggering. And she also had an interesting strategy of poking them, which is actually quite clever to figure out the shape. And I'm sure you're very curious what the experience is like. And I'm showing the sculpture later this month in Central Park, so I will share more details of it. So yeah, there were like 2 sound sculptures with very different form and also texture that are represented by different sound. It's like actually really interesting that even though it's not like a tangible form, through the sound and synthesizing your senses, you can really like feel differences in the object. And the next one is, the next room has 2 worm sculptures and 1 air sculpture. So the worm sculpture is made of a blob of warmth. And by carefully feeling the air, you can sense the boundary between warmer air and cooler air. Just like when you are swimming in a lake or swimming in the sea, maybe you have felt one time that the leg can sense, like, my one leg is in the cold water and then the other is in the warm water. So I can sort of sense like a boundary between those two. So I would make that analogy. And so different from like common scenes in art galleries where people just breathe through to look as much as possible, like breathing through the like sculptures or paintings on the wall, people really take time to awaken their senses and move slowly to really see things. Even if we see something, it doesn't mean that we really see it. How much can we know from just looking at a painting? But we feel like we see it, but here it's so apparent that when you're not seeing it, you're not really seeing it. So you really need to take time and exploring different areas and to make effort. So many people naturally close their eyes to focus more, and after realizing that vision is not really seeing anything in, vision is not doing anything in seeing the sculptures. And here, when you experience the sculptures, you experience a conflict in your sensory perception, since there is nothing to see, but there is something when you use your other senses. Usually, you can see something and you can feel it, but in this case, the visual part is absent, so you get to experience this weird conflict. And the more open your heart to this confusion and unfamiliar feelings, the better you can see. And children's are like, they tend to be really great at seeing interactive art, unless they break things. So they usually don't hold strong judgmental like attitude or prejudice, and they're very good at accepting new ideas or feelings, and even without explanation. And I really love how she was really feeling it and felt like her heart is so open. And an overall shape of the worm sculpture can be hinted by a thermal camera, which can visualize heat information. And we are so familiar with this heat camera these days because of COVID. And the next is air sculpture. This sculpture is based on quite sophisticated technology. It is different from the wind from the fan or simple airflow. It's like a hologram made of vibration in the air, and you can feel sort of vibrating pixels floating in the air. It's quite an unusual and weird experience. And many of my work is based on technical research, and they often involve making custom software and hardware, which take a lot of time. But I'm not really interested in showcasing the technology per se, but more interested in creating a new sensory language through these tools. So probably that's why I unconsciously made the decision of not showing any technology, and they're all actually hidden in the podium. And in front of invisible sculptures, people with sight and without become completely equal. In this video, a visually impaired visitor is experiencing the air sculpture. And she was so good at seeing this, using her fingers instead of her hands, unlike other people who usually use their palm. And really taking time seeing each part. And what she saw was so accurate and sophisticated, and we were all surprised since most of us don't have great accuracy in our tactile senses. So the museum organized a preview and workshop for visually impaired visitors in the local community before the show. And art museums are not usually an accessible place for visually impaired people. So because of that, it was very hard to convince them to even come to the museum, because they come to museum, there's nothing to see. They are just coming for some press release, and actually they cannot enjoy anything. They cannot even talk in the museum, so it's a very frustrating experience for them, is what they said. But we convinced them to come, and then they were very skeptical when they came. Oh, like, we are in the museum again. They're gonna take pictures, but in this show, we are very careful about like those things, and also that there were actually a lot of things, like everything was very accessible to visually impaired people, and they really enjoyed the experience and hope that there are more shows like that so they can really come back. And we are at the room 4. We passed by room 3. We'll get there soon. While the other sculptures can be experienced through senses other than vision, but it's still some sensory experience. But the thought sculpture can be only seen through your reflection. And the thought sculpture is placed in the middle of the like fenced area, and it is being illuminated. And visitors are listening to the verbal description of the sculpture through my voice, coming from directional speakers. So while listening to the description of the piece, they envision the shape and materiality and the story of the sculpture in their mind. And my curator wanted to place this in the last room of the show, because she thinks that this piece demonstrates the immateriality and distilled essence of invisible sculpture by removing all the digital technology and no experimental element. It's really just your mind. It's like sort of my mind is meeting the audience mind, is what my curator said, and I thought that's a very interesting standpoint. And I realized that I didn't use any technology to create this piece. I mean, I guess I use audio and like recording and like directional speakers, but conceptually this is purely non-digital. So I asked people, what did you see from invisible sculptures? I was just curious. So at the end of the show, visitors are invited to make what they saw with a piece of clay. And they label them and put them on a shelf. And the clay sculpture becomes a collective perception of the invisible sculpture altogether. And people saw the same sculpture, but people saw different shapes at some degrees. And I remember overhearing visitors talking to each other, the strangers, like instead of fighting over one answer, people were really respecting and listening to what other people saw. They were very curious what other people's experience was like and what form they saw, which I think is a very precious experience, because in the real world, when we see something, I'm right, you did see the wrong thing, is usual conversation. So I found it like extremely empowering. From observing people that they are like more respectful of differences when using their senses other than vision. And like when we see with senses other than vision, maybe the truth is rather obscure and relative. And this part makes the project a celebration of diversity based on our physical, cultural, and social backgrounds. So over the 5 months of the show, thousands of visitors made thousands of clay sculptures, and this became the final piece at the show. This final piece, which all visitors made all together, is the only visual work in the show, and it gives a strong visual identity to the exhibition, which I like that I didn't make it. These numerous visual participatory sculptures prove and and amplify the relativity and fluidity of invisible sculpture through a variety of forms that are slightly or largely different from each other. So these clay sculptures are fired into ceramic sculptures because I wanted to analyze what made people see different or similar things. Someone was saying that, oh, you should do a matchmaking for people who made similar things. Oh, yeah, that's true. And also for preserving all of this. Just to look at some of the sculptures, clay sculptures. These are clay sculpture of the worm sculpture, the second worm sculpture, which the kid was, a girl was seeing. It's like this long and flat piece. And you can see a similarity in terms of the proportion and how soft they are, but you'll also see differences in details in terms of how each person felt and perceived from the same thing. And I really like this representation of the air sculpture by a visitor, and it's so intricate and dynamic, and I feel like this sculpture feels like air to me. And well, no story can be completed without talking about the pandemic time these days. So in spring 2020, the virus hit New York very hard, and I had to move out from NYU and also figure out how to teach physical computing online, which was quite a challenge. And I also had to move out from a collective studio space that I had in downtown Brooklyn. And the show was canceled. It was quite frustrating time for me. And I was just sitting in my room. I brought everything back from NYU and from my studio. So I was just sitting with a lot of tools and unfinished work. So I started thinking, why don't I just build a cart and bring it to places wherever I want? And I really love carts. I always collect pictures of cards on the street. So I made a card that made every technological part portable, and then brought the card to East Village, Tompkins Square Park, Union Square. And on the journey, I met a lot of friends with wheels, and also to Gimhae in South Korea. It was a really beautiful spring day with this sakura. And by bringing my work to streets, I felt somewhat free from not having to rely on any institutions to show my work and meet visitors. And more than others, I was able to meet more diverse visitors that I might not have met if I was just showing in galleries or museums. Yeah, and then this footage was from Gimhae. It was a very nice spring day. So I asked the question of, is art for everyone? I don't feel that way. It requires time, energy, and more than $20 in New York just to even visit the museum. And oftentimes, somehow, entering a gallery gives me a lot of pressure. Maybe it's similar for other people. I don't know, I feel like I need to be dressed up, looking very nice, and looking artsy or rich. So I'm very interested in this question of who can experience the art. So anyway, this work turned out to be very timely in the time of COVID, and I've had chances to work with different public places and art venues to meet more people. And this was at Umbo with Brooklyn Arts Council. She's experiencing one of the sound sculptures, and her facial expression is just so real. And in the middle of bustling streets, people relocate themselves in and find a piece of their mind for minutes or how much they, whatever they, however long they want to feel for. And what they meet in the experience is actually not my artwork, but it's actually themselves through the experience that is created by my artwork.
So it was much larger than what I initially thought, and quite tall, and then it got wide towards the middle. Almost like it was tall and skinny up here and vertical, and then got wide this way, and there was a bulbous like shape towards the bottom.
So this is what the visitors said when I asked them what they saw. And these three kids who were making clay sculptures together were so cute. And they had a very serious discussion about what the form is and then what each of them saw. And they were speaking in a very poetic language in Korean. I don't exactly remember, but it was a very memorable moment. And by bringing this individual sculpture to public spaces, outside galleries or museums, I was able to encounter even wider range of perception from a variety of people. And yeah, so I'm pushing the card again on Sunday, October 23rd, this time with the Met Museum at the Central Park, and it's at the Columbus Circle entrance. It's called Main Monument area near the bike rack. And I chose that place because there are many carts, there are many food carts, so I'm gonna be with other wheels. So yeah, if you're around and curious to experience, because I feel like I'm only like teasing you about the sculpture, because you can experience, but feel free to join if you are interested. So the last piece I want to share is Invisible Forest in the Invisible Landscape series, which is a larger and more immersive body of work stemmed from the Invisible Sculptures series. And it was also shown at the Clay Museum. So yeah, Invisible Forest is a piece where you can experience a forest without a forest in an empty room full of fog through the sound and light that is responding to you. So yeah, well, as final comment, digital technology is logical and mechanical. And I like making things that are humane and soft using this logical material, which is quite challenging, actually. And for me, digital technology is just one of the tools I use when I create art. It is a really strong and really fascinating tool, and I love it, but sometimes it is just not necessary. I guess in case of thought sculpture, for example, or smell sculpture. And sometimes combining them with analog materials makes my artist language much richer. And well, in the end, I think I make projects to meet new people and as a way of learning about the world and getting to know more people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. So I think with my work and the creation process, I redefine the relationship between art and the audience. That's, I guess, what I'm unconsciously trying to do. By inviting participants to become part of the work and by occupying unconventional public spaces that are outside gallery or museums. So yeah, this footage was from the workshop at the Clay Arc Museum with visually impaired people. So yeah, well, thank you for coming here today. And I said I make work to meet more people, and I'm very glad that I was able to meet more people like you today here. So thank you.
So we have some time for some questions. So does anybody have any questions? Okay.
How did you decide what exactly sculpture
Oh, you mean the what is the answer?
Yeah.
So I get the question a lot. And my answer is that I don't reveal them. The process is different depending on the sculpture. Some sculpture, I usually play a lot with clay first, and then sort of translate it into digital. And my initial versions were very clear in terms of what the shape is, and many people will like see the same thing from it. But because I really like the clay sculpture part and how diverse people's perception are when we are not seeing them, I'm going more towards making a little blurry edges. So about like 30 or 40% is sort of different depending on how you interact with it.
Have you ever considered, I mean, it seems like something that would be interesting for people that are on the autism spectrum in terms of how they might interact with your...
Oh, sorry, which spectrum?
Autism.
Ah, I see.
ASD. So I was wondering if you thought about that at all.
I heard from some people that it will be very helpful for those people, but I haven't really had the chance to work with them, and I will be very curious what they will feel and what they will make out of it. And some people like recommend me to, oh, like you should do more, like you can do art therapy with this because it's in the end about themselves and they're really like internally reflecting when they are experiencing it. So yeah, I am interested in those directions too, and thank you for thinking of that. Oh, for this particular exhibition at the Clay Arc Museum, they, the curator team somehow found me and then they reached out to me. Yeah, so she said she saw in some French blog, which I didn't know it exists, and I still don't know where that was, but yeah, yeah, in this case, it was really lucky for me in a way that someone saw my work, and they invited me to do something, and then they were really fully supporting. So I felt really lucky, but also at the same time, I applied to a lot of things, and different strategies, like get to know people and something happens, and a show happens, and then that show make me happen on another show. So it's all different ways. And to be honest, as an artist, I don't try to get a full, like instead of like getting a full-time job at a company, art making is really about making, but also figuring out how to survive in the world. And that part, I found it's like I guess very much like a business in a way, but it's a very specific kind of area, I feel. And I encounter different challenges every day, which is very interesting to me. Yeah, it's like there are uncertainties and like opportunity come in different ways, but I just keep making and learning through them, and that makes me learn more about the world, I guess.
So I guess my question is, what kind of drew you to this like interaction of like this different type of medium? Like especially with interfacing with technology, kind of what made you decide to do something so unique?
You mean like using like interaction itself?
Yeah, like what made you like want to work with that?
I was working as a user experience researcher and designer before, and worked in like internet companies and worked in academia, and I really wanted to make something rather than researching something people made. So that's how I started this. And I guess interactivity, maybe I'm just instantly drawn to it, growing up as a like digital generation, I guess. But I don't know, I like people, and I think when I made the illuminated path, which is the following light, and that was my very early piece, and I really love how people are enjoying it. They are like open this mouth, and one of my favorite artists, Zach Lieberman, called this as a like open mouth phenomenon. And when people really enjoy it, they like open mouths, and that really struck me as a like, oh wow, I'm so happy that someone is like feeling something, like either positive or negative from my creation, and that was really meaningful moment to me. So I think somehow unconsciously I delved more into more interactive. So maybe the light bulb work was a little interactive, but now I'm really involving them into the process of the art making. So yeah, but it's a very good question. I haven't really explicitly thought about it, so I'm gonna think about it more.
Briefly talk about how the later part you like started to think about how to institutionalize the work. I was just wondering, before you like moved all of the work into the museum, did you have to make any changes, or like was there any compromises that you had to make?
That's an interesting question. I guess it really is up to the venue and what the project is, what the show was. In this case of the exhibition at the Clay Art Museum, I actually didn't need to really make compromises because it was a solo show, and then they were really fascinated with this idea, and then they wanted to give the most amount of freedom. But there was one compromise I had to make, which was for the smell sculpture. They didn't want durian in the space because it's a living thing, and they're like all docents and educators in the space, but like who's gonna manage? It's very hard to find fresh durian in Korea also. So after many discussions and idea brainstorming, we ended up making a sticker. Like I created a perfume with a local perfumer that is representing the city where the museum was shown. It's a very historically important city. And then we created a perfume, and then when people are entering, they would wear the perfume. They don't know they're wearing because it's a sticker, like entrance sticker that you would get in any museums. Like, okay, I'm getting the sticker, great. And then, like at the end of the exhibition, they see the video and learn that they were actually the smell sculpture. So they were performing as a smell sculpture without noticing it because of a mask. Like they can sort of, like it's hard to smell, but then when they watch the video explaining the work, they would start smelling, oh, like I was work. So that was one compromise I had to make. But in other cases, there are many situations because of funding situation, or they have to adjust the idea, or because of the space limitations, the work needs to be smaller or larger than it needs to be. So I don't think they're a bad thing. I think it's really good, and they're moment of connecting my world with their world, and it's very interesting always to negotiate those things. But I also love my freedom of just me and my card and someone who can help me. Yeah, you can go and then.
Quick question: did you conceive of the 5 pillars first, or was there more or less? Did you have to simplify things in any way?
Somehow it started with 5. I don't know why. I guess I was thinking of different invisible material that is triggering different senses. But it started with 5, the initial version of 5, but I did a lot of iteration of each of them. And then some of them became 2 instead of 1. For example, the worm sculpture, that was only 1, but it became 2 after some iterations. And Yeah, and then thought sculpture actually has many versions, and smell sculpture also has a durian version and this sticker version. So yeah, it started as 5, but they were sort of like varying through the way. Oh, I think there is one person. You are like keep holding it, so I will listen to you first, and then you can speak later.
Do you think there are ways that we can become more sensitive to other senses other than vision, so hearing or sense or smelling? Like what would you do?
Do you have any ideas? I think like blocking one of the senses can like enable you to practice those, I think. I really wanted to be able to use my both hands, so there was a period of time that I was not using my right hand, and I tried to really exercise my left hand to be able to write or like doing chopsticks, and it sort of worked to train. And I believe that if we are like, I don't know, maybe 1 hour of a day not seeing anything, and then that, I'm sure that you will hear more things and you will become more sensitive in terms of what you're smelling or touching, because that's how we need to survive. Like if we cannot see something, we just have to use other senses more, and I think that process might help. I don't know, but maybe, or like having less stimulation, like if simulations are really big or the music is very high volume in a room, you don't need to be really sensitive to sense anything, but when they're very low, you sort of have to really listen to them. So maybe making stimulations a little smaller might help. Just random ideas. Yes.
Would you say that you're more focused on like making different versions or iterations of previous projects, or trying to find inspiration for new projects?
I guess in terms of my process, it has been a lot of iterations, because I feel like, I conceptualized this idea into these sculptures, but I feel like there is really more into it. And I feel like the technique can be better, and like this experience can be improved this way, so I just had like these small ideas of how to improve, and I felt like with the solo exhibition, it was sort of a culmination of this project, and it's like sort of nicely packaged now, and it can go somewhere to meet more people, but at the same time, I wanted to get out of the museological object, the smallest, the like podium, and I'm now experimenting with like white cube or black cube. So they are also very museum type object, and I'm just emptying them and then making it a little bigger. And I find it very interesting in terms of my creative process and how people are reacting it. So the invisible forest that I showed as the last one is one of the like recent one that I created that version. Then I feel like it's like sort of a phase 2, and I am like adding, like going further with that idea. So, yeah. But I also have many other projects that are like, for example, there was a installation that with the NYU Engelberg Center, like Law and Innovation, and it was a project on privacy and simple sensors, like Arduino sensors that we always use but don't have any privacy law around it, like different from like Bluetooth or like Wi-Fi or like facial recognition or cameras. And I installed sensors in my room for many months and collecting very simple data, and I recreated my presence in the room without myself, and it was a sound, like multi-channel sound installation, and in sound collaboration with Jesse Simpson, who's here. Anyway, and then I'm inviting people one by one to my private space so they can experience my presence in the room. So it's like a different experiment, but this is also in a line with like showing in unconventional spaces. So yeah, it's, I don't know if this answers your question, but it's all around.
In your practice, you like to collaborate a lot with audience or the user and peeps, but do you collaborate a lot when making the work? And if so, like how was that collaboration process between different disciplines, not only art?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I graduated from, I went to, so my background, like I went to SAPC, which is School for Poetic Computation. It's a very small alternative, like very cool school in West Village. I also went to ITP where I'm teaching. It's all about, like the ITP started by, oh, what if we give video camera to like philosophers when the video camera was a new technology? So it's really DIY, and then this spirit of you make everything by yourself, right, from scratch, or you take some like open source libraries, whatever. But I was trained to just being able to do everything myself. So I started as doing things myself, and then that was very comfortable for me. But when it becomes a bigger production, and I can do some of the sound design, but I'm not like super good at it. And I start, oh, like, Jesse, could you collaborate with me on this? And we are gonna work together on this part, for example. Or could you consult me with the programming part? I know a little bit of this and I can do this amount, but this needs to be more sophisticated, that I need your collaboration. So those things, so it becomes sort of a, like a little production project or team for each project. So yeah, I think in this type of like art and technology, it is sort of necessary, like unless I do like very specific thing like over and over again, which is really great, maybe like making a circuit sculpture all my life. And it will be like very artisanal like practice, but it becomes like using all different fields of technology, it is sort of inevitable and necessary and like much better to collaborate. So when you go to galleries, these days it became more like better thing to like just credit everyone. This show like all moving chairs, like they're autonomous chairs. There's a Chelsea exhibition by a very well-known artist, and it was by this artist, but there was a production team and like hundreds of people there, which is, I thought it's a very good movement that, because they are invisible, but they all deserve credits and they did really good work, each of them.
So let's thank the speaker and we can continue our conversation at the reception.
Thank you